Hello everyone once again and welcome to Mubariz podcast. It's a real pleasure, guys, to welcome Robert Billard, an Afghanistan veteran, a writer that has wrote some books and several articles about Afghanistan and also about military strategies. And during his military career, he served in Afghanistan and other regions. And alongside his service, he has written, as I have said before, extensively about modern warfare, military strategy, and the future of Afghanistan. Dear Billard, thank you so much for joining us and for taking the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. Um, the Afghanistan is something I'm very passionate about, and I served in Afghanistan, and I think that the future of Afghanistan and its people is something that's very important to me. And I don't want to forget about my experiences there and the people who are living there and their future. Yes, I have written a lot about Afghanistan, and I will continue to write. The one thing I want to say is you give me a lot of credit, so thank you. I have not written any books yet, actually, but I am
Oh,
working,
right.
of course.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I need to. I need to. So maybe by you saying this on your podcast, it will motivate me to actually start writing a book about it.
Yeah, actually, we will be waiting for that, honestly. Thank you so much once again. Um, Dear Billard, I would like to start from here that everyone who served in Afghanistan, they came with a different understanding of the country, like the people, the culture, the atmosphere. Afghanistan is often described as a place like that can change people who spend time there, who served there, or maybe who lived there. I would like to start my first question from here that uh, what was your biggest secret from Afghanistan while you're serving in the country?
No, absolutely. And I do want to start with just letting everyone know that any views and opinions I express today, they're strictly my own. They do not represent any official policy, position, or views of the Department of War or any of its components. But with that, yeah, with my experience in Afghanistan, I was deployed there in 2014 into 2015. So I was there at a really interesting time, actually, because it was what we called in America the Operation Enduring Freedom. That ended at the end of 2014. And after that, there was the NATO Resolute Support Mission. So I was there during a very pivotal transition point when the United States was winding down its active combat operations in Afghanistan. Now, of course, as we know, that actually continued, of course, until 2021. So it still continued for, many years after that. But, at that time, I was a logistics advisor to the Afghan National Security Force, which included the Afghan army and the police. And it was very interesting because there was supposed to be these advisors in every region of the country. But by that point, most of them had been, withdrawn and they had not been replaced. So I ended up working with a crew in Kabul and would go all over the country. But most of my time was spent in Kandahar. And Kandahar is an interesting place as far as the Afghan war is concerned, and there's a lot of history there and culture. And as you and probably many of your listeners are aware, there was a gentleman during that time who was responsible for the security of Kandahar province, and his name was General Razik.
General
And
Razik, yeah, the
yeah,
hero.
and yes, absolutely. And he kept Kandahar very safe. So Kandahar, at many times during the Afghan war, was a dangerous place for coalition forces and Afghans. But when General Razik was in charge, it was very safe. And I know that because of his leadership, I was able to make it home. But I did travel all over the country, and some places I went to were very dangerous. I spent a lot of time in Kabul, and at that time, Kabul was very dangerous. And I went to Helmand province. And actually, of note, I went to Helmand province after most of the Americans had left. So it had been handed over to the Afghan security force, and at that time, it was very, very dangerous for them. But I also went to Herat and Logar province, and I got to travel all over the country, and I got to really admire the beauty of that country. Um, I understand that experiences may vary for a lot of people, and maybe there are some people who had a very different experience than me. But I got to see the good of the Afghan people. And, truly what I thought was important was trying to help them build a future. And so as a logistics advisor, though, just to talk more on that experience, um, one of my responsibilities was to travel to different Afghan army units and police units and advise them on maintenance procedures and accounting for many of the weapons and the equipment that the United States government had given
Hmm.
to Afghanistan. And I was actually really surprised for the most part by the professionalism of the Afghan army. Truly, I really was. So, that's one of the misconceptions I think that I would love to clear up with many American listeners, because I think that there is a big misconception that the Afghan army wasn't willing to fight, or they weren't brave or anything like that. But it was
Mhm.
that couldn't be farther from the truth. They were very experienced men and women, actually. And I want to add that because one of my collateral billets during that time was I was a gender focal point for Region South, so for Kandahar. Um, so I was not primarily a gender advisor, but what I would do when I would go to different sites was I would check and do a report to see how women were being integrated into army and police units. Um, and of course, I would see girls going to school, and they were not much. They were the same age as my own daughter at home at the time, or my daughters now, and so that was one of the things that made all the sacrifices feel like it was worth it, because we were trying to help sustain a society where girls could go to school, and so that was just one of the many things that I did there.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
sorry.
mhm.
Go ahead.
You have also mentioned the name of General Razik. I would like to ask, have you had the opportunity to meet him in person and to tell us a little bit more, if you meet him, about his character, about, his personality?
Sure. No, I would love to talk about him. And actually, I wrote about him for military.com recently, where I write. Dr. Hagstrom wrote a really good book about him that I would recommend to anyone who is interested in learning about not just General Razik, but just any, working with local partners, host nation partners, anytime that if you're in a military force and you're deployed somewhere. I think he really breaks down the nuance and the complexity uh, of a character like General Razik, who really sacrificed a lot for his country, and he gave his life for that cause. Um, but yes, so when I was working in what we called RC South, so Regional Command South in Kandahar, the section that I worked in did advise General Razik, had a very close relationship with him. Um, and one of the things that I think that maybe I was disappointed in at the time, was that there were many senior leaders, on the NATO side who were very concerned about him, and they did not want to have pictures taken with him, and they wanted to keep him at an arm's distance. But I think that they took the wrong lesson from him, because um, he was a what I would call a bulwark against
Mhm.
the adversary that we were fighting. So the Taliban, who represented kind of a Pashtun ethno-nationalist movement, well, General Razik was a Pashtun partner that we had in the country, who did a lot of great things for Kandahar. And I understand that people had concerns about the way he did it, but the reality is that when you're working in a place like Afghanistan that's been at war for decades, you have to be willing to meet partners where they are. And I understand that that's not always popular, and sometimes that doesn't um, you know that doesn't match some of the sanitized visions we have of regional security in Western countries.
Yeah,
But the reality
actually,
is, yeah.
Mr. Robert, you have mentioned also about him. There's also, a lot of questions and a lot of debate that the way he has been assassinated and killed. He was standing beside General Scott Miller, if I'm right. Uh,
Yes,
you
that's
know,
right.
um, do you have something to say about like how he has been killed and assassinated, if you have information?
Well, I can't speak to anything that isn't already out there. I think that if you just apply Occam's razor, the simplest answer is probably the reality. Unfortunately, there were many attempts on General Razik's life leading up to
Yeah.
that, and the Taliban were, and I don't discount their capabilities and their capacity because they practice to this day something called strategic endurance. So for them, it was an existential crisis, someone like General Razik. So
Yeah.
they had to do whatever it took to take him out. And that changed the course of the war. I truly believe that. I think that was a major factor because I think having someone like him in the South was very important for our interests and also the interests of a free Afghanistan that's safe and peaceful for its people. Now, yeah, that said, I mean, my
Yep.
understanding and go ahead.
Yeah, if you change the topic and come to on your writing and the articles that you have written, and
Yes.
I can say this that you have written thoughtfully about Afghanistan, including your article. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Lawrence
Mhm.
Shadow, how Afghan resistance can topple the current regime inside Afghanistan. In that piece, you explore whether the history offers lessons for those opposing the current regime today. It has generated I'm sure a lot of discussions among those people who are interested in military strategies or and military in general. I would like to ask this, Mr. Robert, that what inspired you actually to write that article, and what is the main message or the point that you hope that the readers would take away from that?
No, that's a great question. Thank you. I was really excited to write that article that was published in Small Wars Journal, and I hope that other people, have been able to read that and think about it. So, for me, what inspired me about that is that I think a lot about Afghanistan, not just about its past and present, but what does the future look like for Afghanistan? Now, there is a lot of resistance movements currently in the country. And unfortunately, um, you know, they're they are fractured. It's a disparate group of resistance. And so I wanted to take a look at history because honestly, I believe that there's nothing new under the sun. So
Mhm.
anything that we see, you can find some sort of historical analogy to it. And so I started looking into T.E. Lawrence because he was an interesting character in the First World War. When most people think about World War I, they think about the European part of it, and they think about trench warfare. And really, truly, it was a world war, and it had multiple theaters. And so I think that there is a lot that you can take from his experience and you can apply it to today because um, insurgencies, right? And the Taliban themselves waged an insurgency for 20 years. So you can take a look at what makes an insurgency successful and what do they need to do that. Well, now resistance movements, it's on the opposite side, right? So the Taliban are the ruling party. They're not the insurgency anymore. So I really wanted to explore how insurgencies can be successful. And I thought that T.E. Lawrence was a great example of that. Um, and so, I took a look at how did he accomplish this? Well, there was a lot of agency that he provided. He did not come in to his Arab counterparts and tell them what to do. Instead, he came in, he learned their culture, their language, their history, everything like that. He got, all in. Um,
Mhm.
he got all in on that, and what he was able to provide for them was enabling. So he did not dictate, but he enabled. And I found that that's actually a critical component to a successful insurgency is having external benefactors. And
Yeah.
so,
But since you published that
sure.
article, Afghanistan has continued to change. The current regime remain in power still. I'm sure you're aware of that. And while the opposition groups face, significant political and military challenges both inside and outside the country, and many people wonder that whether an organized resistance still has a realistic future. Like these days, we're, hearing a lot of news in Badakhshan, in some other, northern parts of Afghanistan. And do you believe an effective resistance movement can still emerge inside the country?
Yes, I do. But there are some challenges that they're facing right now, and I think that they're going to continue to face. And one is that the unity of resistance movements in Afghanistan, like I mentioned earlier, it is fractured, and they have to try to find some at least common ground in order to accomplish their goals. So that's the
Yeah.
first big one, and that's very difficult. And Afghanistan has always been like that. Even during the Soviet-Afghan War, which I wrote about, the resistance movement in the 1980s was not fully united. I mean, it was a very
Yeah, they were
ideologically
divided.
disparate. Yeah, they were very divided, but they did have a common goal, and they were able to come together to at least defeat the Soviets. So that's the first thing I would say, is that there has to be efforts toward a unified cause. That alone will be very challenging. The second part, though, is very difficult to overcome, but not impossible. And that is that insurgencies need external benefactors, generally, in order to be successful. Right now, resistance movements are having a very hard time um, getting the kind of international support they need. And so that's what T.E. Lawrence provided to insurgents against the Ottoman Empire, because he provided Western support and arms, training, and all that uh, in order to wage a successful
Mhm.
insurgency. So right now, a big problem with trying to get that external support is geography,
Mhm.
because look at all the countries that surround Afghanistan. It would be very, very difficult for a Western or any um, power really to be able to effectively enable insurgency movements in Afghanistan. It's not impossible. We've seen it before. But I would say that those are the two big challenges right now facing resistance movements. They're very brave. They're doing amazing work, and they need to continue practicing strategic endurance. They must
Yeah.
continue to be patient.
Now, if we shift our focus on the presence of Russia and China in Afghanistan, while the United States has reduced its presence in the country in Afghanistan, other countries have become more active in Afghanistan. I name like Russia, China, like, they're digging mines, investing millions and millions of dollars in roads and other things. China has expanded, its economic engagement, and Russia has strengthened, its diplomatic ties, like we have seen. They recognize the current regime inside Afghanistan. And Afghanistan is once again, becoming a part of a larger. Uh, I would like to ask this: if you speak in terms of from a military perspective, that which country do you think has the clearest, long-term strategy in Afghanistan today?
Right now, I think it's China. Again, I think that they understand what they're looking for in terms of resources and how they can exploit Afghanistan. They are patient. I think that they have a long-term vision there. And like you said, that just Afghanistan, just based on its geography, has always been a strategic location and always will be. And it borders China. There is a small border with China. And so China has a vested interest in ensuring that Central Asian countries are operating on their terms. Um, and that's just how the great game is played. So I think that they have the clearest path right now there. They have the proximity, they have the influence, they have the time, money, energy, all that. I think that Russia's recent actions in recognizing the Taliban are disturbing to me, especially considering Russia's history in the country. And I find it ironic that the Taliban would celebrate this after having celebrated, fighting the Soviet Union for as long as they did. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, the what became the Taliban was not the only aspect of 1980s resistance, but they grew out of aspects of that resistance. So I think that Russia right now has a very short term goal, and I think that there are mutual interests between Russia and the
Yeah,
Taliban
and I think,
regime.
do you think that the relationship between the current regime inside Afghanistan and the Russia is not long-term strategic, but kind of, you know, tactic, something like that?
Yeah, I mean it's very it's very practical, right? They are realistic about the both sides are
Yeah.
very realistic about the issues that they are having. So, Afghanistan now has some serious economic problems, and they desperately want recognition. Russia right now also, of course, has a vested interest in trying to shore up any support that they can, given their current war in Ukraine. So I think that relationship just has emerged out of a realist sense of practicality, um, and nothing more. But I don't think that that's long-term valuable for either side.
Mhm. Yeah. Uh, Mr. Robert, the wars we see today, are very different like from 20 years ago, like our fathers are telling us, or we're reading in the history books, or we're seeing in the movies and films. Drones like artificial intelligence, cyber operation, and inexpensive, technologies are changing the battlefield faster than ever before. Like the clear example is the war among the Russia and Ukraine, and militaries around the world are adapting these new realities, how do you think like modern technology is changing the future of warfare?
Well, I mean, I think that everything moves faster, of course, and and that's always going to be the case. I think since the Industrial Revolution, really, that warfare is continuing to move faster. Adversaries are trying to outpace their enemies' kill chains faster than ever, and the technology can potentially offer tactical advantages to whoever can leverage them better. But I will add that a major focus of my studies and what I try to express to the world, anyone that's interested in warfare strategy or Afghanistan, even specifically, is what Clausewitz said. Karl von Clausewitz, who was a Prussian strategist in the 19th century, and he wrote that the nature of war, it doesn't change. So that
Mhm.
um, there are aspects of warfare, such as the nature, um, that don't ever change. So, war is what it is. You can change the people, the weapons, the technology, and the nature of war is always going to stay the same. However, the character of any given war is very different. So the wars being fought right now, for example, between Russia and Ukraine, the character of that war is significantly different than the character of the Soviet-Afghan war or the
Mhm.
U.S. war in Afghanistan, or even any other conflicts that have taken place so far in the 21st century, because the speed of technological innovation is increasing so rapidly. Um, but I will add that the reason I bring up Clausewitz and the nature of war is that I do believe that technology is important and people should leverage it in order to gain a tactical advantage.
Mhm.
However, there is no amount of tactical prowess that can overcome bad strategy. So to me,
Yeah,
strategy is more important.
yeah. Uh, Mr. Robert, if we come back on Afghanistan once again, you know,
Sure.
many Afghans hope to see a more peaceful and a stable future for sure. Everyone wants that, the girls, the citizens, the former, officials. And even after decades of conflict, at the same time, the country face economic challenges, John, I'm sure you know this better than me. Like political isolation and the growing regional competition, the road ahead remains uncertain. As someone who served in Afghanistan and as someone who has, years of experience in military, I would like to have your opinion that when you think about Afghanistan, like, I don't know, like 5 years from now, 2 years, 3 years, or maybe 10 years, what gives you the most hope and what concerns you the most?
That's a great question. So as far as what gives me the most hope is that I truly believe that while there was an active insurgency and a war going on for the 20 years that the United States was directly involved in Afghanistan, that still created a generation of Afghans who got to see what you know, more relative freedom can look like in their lives. Um, and though it wasn't always peaceful, depending on where you were and at what time, it did give people an understanding that there is the possibility for a better future. And that was 20 years, right? That was an entire generation of young Afghans who grew up with that, who have now, for the past 5 years, been thrust into something completely different, but they know that it doesn't have to be like this. So I would say that it does give me hope. It gives me hope that people in Afghanistan will strive for a better and more inclusive future for all Afghans, of all different races, and for girls as well and women. So I do believe that does give me hope. However, I am realistic and I understand that really the last 50 years almost in Afghan history have been plagued by violence, but it doesn't have to be that way. Afghanistan has had many long periods of peace and stability, and modern sensibilities, and I think that can come back now. So that's my hope. As far as my concerns, I have some very legitimate concerns, and it's partly tied to what I just said. So, the economic situation there is bad, and I don't think that the ruling regime is going to get any better or treat people any better. And they're not going to relinquish that power and authority so willingly. So, any sort of overcoming that is likely going to involve suffering for people, unfortunately. And I pray that one day there will be peace in Afghanistan. But just realistically, I understand that there is probably more suffering ahead, regardless of how the ruling regime's days play out. And on that too, there's actually something that concerns me, not just for Afghanistan, but for the rest of the world, because leading up to September 11th, 2001, of course, Afghanistan was a safe haven for many terrorists. That's where Osama bin Laden, took up residence, and Al Qaeda was there. But now, actually, I think the situation is even worse than it was in the 90s. I think that there is, some more money and weapons available to the Taliban. I don't believe that they actually have any interest in stopping Al Qaeda or ISIS. I think that they are friendly with both organizations, regardless of what they claim outwardly. So I think that right now, Afghanistan is, again, once more, a safe haven for some of the worst terrorists in the world, who want nothing but to cause destruction and violence. They want to kill people. And so I think that is my biggest concern, is that you have these people operating with impunity in Afghanistan. And I hope that nothing bad happens from that. But I'm realistic, and I understand what the situation is right now. And I understand that these are people who hate, modern ideals and values, and they want to hurt people. And I think that can and will come from Afghanistan again, unless someone is able to stop that.
Yeah, Mr. Robert, I would like to end with a personal note. Many of our listeners or students and young professionals who are passionate about, politics, international affairs, doing something meaningful for their communities, for their people. And they often ask, like, how they can prepare themselves to make a meaningful contribution in any possible way. What advice would you give to young people who want to become a thoughtful leader, maybe in military or, international security, or, simply in military strategy like you?
Well, I think first off, they have to be passionate about what they're doing. So, and that's in any line of work. So whether it's in the military or in academia, or any other industry, they have to be passionate about what it is they're doing. You have to view it as a lifestyle. So for someone in the military, you have to understand that that is not just a job or even a career, but that is your life. And you have to understand why that's so important that you're doing what you're doing. And if you're in the pursuit of knowledge, if you're in academia, then again, you have to be very passionate ideologically about what it is you're pursuing. So that's the first thing. Second, I think that intellectual curiosity is very important. So there are many people out there, many governments that, want people to have a very restricted and closed-minded view of the world. But I think that intellectual curiosity is really important. And I think that the more people are able to explore the things they're interested in uh, to the, most passionate extent possible, I think that that will help. And then lastly, you have to be able to present those things. So if you're passionate about what you do and you're intellectually curious, you have to get good at actually presenting that to people and getting the buy-in from other people, whether that's your peers, um, your boss, the people who work for you, or just even people on the internet. Like you have to be able to present a righteous cause to the world that you're passionate about, something that you follow that's important to you. And if you can present that to people, then you can get people to buy in and follow your vision.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Robert. And at the end, if there's anything that I have missed, or if there's anything that you would like to share, Mike is yours. And I really appreciate the time that you have put on it. And I cannot wait to share this episode with our audience. So,
Mhm.
Mike is yours, man.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk to you. And I hope that, everything I talked about, I hope some people find it informative and interesting. I think there's a long way to go in Afghanistan, and I don't want to ever forget my experience there, and I don't want to forget the people of Afghanistan. I think that there's a lot we can learn from Clausewitz, and I think that that applies even now. To modern resistance movements or people that actually want freedom and security. So thank you for everything you do. And I'm glad that, I was finally able to make the time to come on your show, and I appreciate everything you're doing. So thank you so much.